Hello and welcome to the Happy for PR podcasts. Today I'm here with artist Kate Lycett. Hello, how are you, Kate?
I'm fine, thank you, Fiona.
For the listeners, can you tell us a little bit about your background and where it all started?
I'm originally from Suffolk, but I came north for university in 1995, 20 years ago. And I studied fine art and textiles at St John's in York and ended up working in the textile industry for about 8 years before moving away from the restraints of commercial design, colour briefs, and starting to paint beautiful things of somewhere I learned to love to live.
So how did you find the transition from working in a commercial industry to actually going full-time as an artist?
Well, I started to do it as a sideline because the commercial design briefs were very restrictive. When it came to colour, most particularly, I was always working to corporate prescribed colourways. So I started to paint just buying pots of inks in beautiful colours, particularly blues. I was always drawn to blues and golds and gold thread and just kind of strong contrast and very opulent colours. And originally the work was very abstract, very pattern-based, which was my textile background. And then when I moved to Calderdale in 2005, the landscape was very, very different to where I'd lived before in Yorkshire. I started to paint around here, I started to paint the environment I lived in. So it became landscapes rather than abstract pieces, but still lots of elements of pattern and still very opulent in the use of colour.
So just recently you've been working on your new exhibition, Water and Light. Tell us a little bit about your exhibition.
The previous exhibition I did, the last body of work I put together was for the Chantry House Gallery in Ripley in North Yorkshire, and they were all North Yorkshire scenes. So this is very much a coming home exhibition. This is all about my immediate environment and places I play with my children, places that are special to go on adventures with them. And it's coming home. The light is different, the colours are different in West Yorkshire, and that's what I've been enjoying with this.
So what fascinates you about water and light?
I started running about 18 months ago. I started running to get away from my children who are quite small. And I was running along the towpath, which lies in between the canal and the river. And I was very struck by how still the one side was and how noisy and sometimes quite ferocious the other side was. So it was the contrast between the two, the still water and the moving water. And also, I like to run in all weathers. I actually like to run best in really foul weather. I'm very aware of the changing seasons and the changes of light. Different times of day, there are different colours. Obviously, different seasons, there are different colours. So people do say of the valley that it has its own microclimate. Things get blown in and blow out. The weather seems to move very fast. You can see things rolling down off the hills. If you're up somewhere high, you can see that there's bright sunshine on one hill and it's coming down in stair rods on a different hill. If you want to get above the clouds, you can do that by running up to Studley Pike on a grey day, and you know that it's going to be grey in the valley, but up on the tops you'll be above it all and it'll be bright sunshine and you can't see any of the gloom in the valley. I think that's somewhere very special about here.
Talk us through one of your paintings with the water and light.
Well, there's one, it's a very big one, it's called As the Crow Flies, and it's something that's very striking. Where I grew up in Suffolk is very flat, the horizons are low to the ground, but here you're much more aware of the changing light because the hills catch the light as it changes. So a hill might be kind of golden or pink one moment and the next minute it's almost black. And in this painting, As the Crow Flies, it's a view down from Peckett Well across Hebden Stall. Hebden Stall, the buildings are catching a particularly warm light, and it's a view across to Studley Pike, which is catching a bit of sun, and then there's a far distant hill that's almost pink and gold. And that's a hill that I watch quite a lot. There's somewhere I go to cut my paper lanterns, and this hill I watch from the window while I'm cutting. I'm there for hours and hours, and the hill is never the same colour for more than half an hour. So this particular area above Hebden Bridge is where I'm aware of the light rolling across the hills and the weather rolling across the hills, and I've tried to capture that and all sorts of different lights and different weathers in this one big painting.
How do you select your colour palette?
It depends very much on the mood of a painting. Colour is very important in my paintings. The colour for me is far less about a naturalistic interpretation. It's much more about how colours react with each other. Some colours, they vibrate. And I use colour not to explain just what you see, but you can use colour to explain the other senses. So if it's a particularly warm evening, there's a painting called Woodhouse Mill, which was painted, and it's a particularly warm evening light. There's something very pure about the light. It's slightly hazy, and the air smells sweet. And I was very careful with my colour palette with that. So they're not naturalistic, but you do get a great sense, I think, from looking at it. It's one of my favourite ones, actually. You get a great sense of the stillness and the sweetness in the air. And it's to do with the underpainting, perhaps, which is quite warm pinks in the brickwork on the mill, and the stillness of the reflections. But that contrasts greatly with a more recent one called the Parsonage, which is Haworth. And I tried to capture it's a winter light, it's a very harsh light. And even though the Parsonage is very beautiful, I do think it's a very melancholy place, particularly the view across the churchyard, because you are aware of the history and you're aware of people dying young up there and the Brontes all dying quite young as they did. So contrasting underpainting with that one. So there are deep burgundies under what's eventually a grey building, and it makes the light look quite hard and it makes the stone look quite hard. And it's a big contrast between the one of the soft evening light down by the canal.
Tell us about the locations of your paintings in your collection.
Well, I've had my eye on certain places for the last couple of years. When I was painting the locations in North Yorkshire, I was still mentally recording places I wanted to come back to. One of my favourite pieces, and it's the piece that gave me the idea for the title of the exhibition really, is Lower Lathe Reservoir, which is towards Stanbury, near Haworth. And that's a particularly beautiful reservoir. Some reservoirs I think are very bleak, but this is, it just kind of lies sheltered in a valley. There are pine trees on one side and a very pretty Victorian sluice house. I think it's an octagonal building on a jetty in the middle of it. And at certain times of day the water can be very still and very reflective, and your journey down to it down from a high road, you have a wonderful aspect of it. The colour palette in that is unusually subdued for me. It's very soft, it's very still, and it's very calm. And I used quite a limited palette of Baltic blues and greens and soft turquoises. Other places I noticed running along the towpath, there's a piece called the Hammock. It's a little landmark. There's a blue shed and red pots and apple trees and chickens in it. And there is a hammock hung between two trees. And I knew I wanted to paint this place because it's so pretty and so hidden. And that led me to the discovery that I really like painting chickens, because chickens are ridiculously decorative. They're quite funny and they're full of pattern. So I painted this piece called the Hammock, which is of this orchard. And then out towards Haworth again, there's a large allotment patch. There are several allotments. So they're terraced, which in itself allows for fantastic patterns because they're all stacked up. Someone's done the job for me. So you have sheds built out of old front doors and bits of old double glazing. People use old dye barrels as planters, which are always a wonderful vivid blue. And this place is full of chickens, loads of chickens running free around everybody else's allotments. One of my favourite pieces of all of them, because it's full of chickens and it's full of life and it's just such a happy picture.
So you've done some paintings in Todmorden. Tell us a little bit about that.
One of the paintings I've done is of the Unitarian church high up on the hillside. and it's got a very grand spire. And I went to do some drawings of it on a very hot day last July, and it was very quiet, and it was set out for a wedding, somebody's wedding day. So there was bunting strung up everywhere, and there were boxes of ice and bottles of beer and cups and saucers all laid out on trestle tables outside. And I don't know if they were in the church, I don't think they were, or whether it was just waiting for the wedding party to arrive. So I quickly did some very quick drawings and took some photographs and then left. But the painting has in it, it has bunting fluttering in it, which really was there. It's a very pretty church.
Oh, I mean, Topperden is a lovely place, and having spent a bit of time there just recently, there's some fascinating buildings, beautiful architecture. You know, it's just lovely. So where else have you painted then for this collection?
Another big piece, a very special place to me, is the big park. And I do seem to spend quite a lot of my life there at the moment. I used to go and stand by the canal and try and catch sight of my daughter Hattie when she very first gone into nursery, when she was only a few months old. And I'd just try and catch sight of her in one of the downstairs rooms. And since then, I've taught all my children to ride bikes there, to roller skate there, to scoot there. We've had picnics there with the hills behind the canal, the view from the big park. And I'm not really a doggy person, but I couldn't do the big park without dogs in. So there are dogs hidden in tiles at the bottom of the painting.
So how do you decide what you put in your print trays? Because they're quite legendary, I'd have to say. Every time you create these print trays, they sell out, and then you've got a waiting list as well, haven't you, for them? So how do you actually decide what to put in there?
Well, the print trays are very special because the print trays themselves are quite hard to find. I have to get the right layout. They have to be really well kept. Preferably with little brass fixtures on the corners. So in themselves, they're very beautiful things. They're very much like jewellery boxes waiting for the treasure to go inside them. And I found a particularly unusual layout for one of these, and it's the one I filled with trees. It painted itself in a way. The layout of
handy.
It was. I kind of take no credit for it. When it arrived, it couldn't be anything other than trees, and I start off by treating the background papers with all sorts of layers of inks and just kind of textural techniques. So there are about 4 layers of inks and colour on the individual pieces of paper before I start painting. And some of those cards, some of those pieces of paper had patterns in them that suggested shapes or atmospheres or the colours that needed to go with them. That's actually my favourite piece in the whole exhibition, the printer's tray with the trees in. And the other one was from my lovely friend Nancy Ann, who said something about allotments. And we decided between us that allotments by their very nature are quite cellular. So it seemed to be quite logical to put allotments, or all the elements that exist in allotments, in a printer's tray. And this followed on from doing the big painting that with all the chickens and the sheds in, called the allotments. So it was just continuing that theme. So in this one there are very pretty sheds, greenhouses, pumpkins, chickens, flower pots, all the paraphernalia that you get with allotments.
I love it. Fantastic. And what else have you got lined up?
On the 30th of April, I'm going along to Hart Gallery with my pots of ink and my brushes, and I'm going to just sit in the gallery and paint and hope that people are going to come along and distract me and bring me tea.
That's always good. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. Thank you very much, Kate.
Thank you, Fiona.
Kate Lycett's exhibition Water and Light will be on at Hart Gallery in Hebden Bridge until June the 21st. Look forward to seeing you all there. Thank you for listening.